I get the impression that some of you are feeling like you're watching a train wreck in slow motion on this project. And hi, hello, my name is Allie. I'm an independent graphic designer coming to you from just outside Toronto, and this is my channel where I talk about what I'm knitting, how it's going, and what it's costing me. And today I have a pretty solid project update for you on my current whip, as well as discussions on some future plans. Now, as for my mug and tea of the day, as I mentioned last time, we are firmly in Halloween mug season in this house. So today is my Hocus Pocus mug from Slow Sunday Ceramics, and out of this, I'm drinking the Autumn Bold tea from Keats & Co., which is a really nice, like, appley, cinnamony, really autumnal flavor. So very appropriate for this time of year. If you're ever interested in checking out Keats & Co., I do have an affiliate link with them that's always in my description that gets you a bit of a discount. Why did my framing change? Okay, we really have to start this from scratch, eh? All right, that's better. I don't know what just happened to my framing there. I had it all set up perfectly, and then it was just like, nah. Now, as for what I'm wearing today, this is my squiggle sweater, which is sort of a self-charted to try to dupe an And Other Stories sweater that by the time I was aware of its existence was no longer available in store. Couldn't find it anywhere secondhand. I looked for like 2 years, and then I took up knitting, and I was like, wait a minute. So I self-charted this sort of doodly effect on the sweater, and I used as my basis for that Amy Herzog's pattern for the basic pullover set-in construction at the worsted weight, and that's a pattern design that accommodates busts measuring from 29.5 to 61 inches. So as for my cost per wear on this one, I finished this in June 2023, so this one's had a solid 2 calendar years now of use, and in that time I've worn it 47 times, which feels pretty good. Honestly though, I think that I would maybe have gotten more use out of this sweater if I hadn't knit it kind of at the exact time that I became really aware of the concept of superwash wool, and I sort of been first learning about it was like, oh my god, that's amazing, like you get all the benefits of wool but you can still put it in the washer and dryer, and isn't that great? Why wouldn't you knit everything out of superwash? And I think this was the last sweater that I knit out of superwash, at least that wasn't like the one I made for my sister, knowingly like that's what will be easy for her to maintain, because there was this very narrow window, which was when I was making the sweater, which was basically learning about the benefits of superwash without understanding the drawbacks of superwash. And I think that superwash is so great for so many people, but just all the things that I love the most about wool are sort of counteracted by the superwash process. So as I understand it, you basically lose the lanolin, which is the natural oils in the wool that is responsible for a lot of its properties. And the superwash process is basically adding like a plasticky coating to your fibers. So the material choices that I made on this one are not ones that I would make in the future. And because of that, I feel like this one would have gotten a little bit more use if it better fit the category of like when I'm packing to go somewhere and I'm bringing just 1 or 2 sweaters and I want something that I know that I can reliably layer if the weather ends up being different than what I'm expecting it to be. Like if I need something to prevent the kind of cold that seeps into your bones, I want a sweater that's natural wool, not superwash wool. It's just going to be warmer, it's gonna insulate better. So this one rarely makes it into a suitcase, which does hinder it a little bit. But on the other hand, also I think because it's superwash, I think of it as one of my less warm sweaters, which in theory makes it a little bit more usable in the sort of transitional months. Like this does tend to be one of the ones that I pull out earlier in the season in the sort of early fall weather. So you win some, you lose some. Like I said, we're currently at 47 wears on this one. The total project cost was $222.50 Canadian, which puts our current cost per wear at $4.73 Canadian. Okay, so another thing that I wanted to tell you about before I get into my whip update though, is I had mentioned in a previous video that I think that my no frills cardigan is, depending on how you want to look at it, it's either the cursed sweater or it's the luckiest sweater in the world, depending on whether you feel like being glass half empty or glass half full. Because, so I wear this around the house all the time, similar to a house coat, just like I'm cold, I'm gonna put this on. And that has happened, knock on wood, without incident. Great, no problem. Any time though that I try to wear this like for something, like I'm putting together an outfit and something's like happening that day, it always goes awry. It's like this sweater is determined to destroy itself. And I just have to tell you that this trend continues. So previous incidents that I had mentioned, I won't tell these stories in full detail. If you want the whole thing, go watch this video. But short version, one time dropped an entire cocktail shaker full of like mushed blackberry, hit the floor and exploded all over the cardigan. Somehow managed to get all of that out. And then the second time I was in the car and I had somehow like failed to get all of it inside the car door with me. So like 1.5 feet of it was just dangling out in like the highway slush of like a late winter in Canada. Pulled it inside and it was like disgusting. Again, came out perfectly clean. It's totally fine. But last night, chaos struck again. So I was out to dinner with my friend Jan, who you might recognize as the one who I gifted my poppy tank to. So Jan and I were out for dinner, and whenever we go out to dinner, we always order 2 desserts and we just share them, right? Like, to me, that's like the only correct way to do dessert. But one of the desserts we ordered, it was a deep fried cheesecake. So picture kind of like an empanada, except that the outside is made of like churro, and then on the inside was cheesecake. And when the waiter brought it over, we were given like a sort of like a steak knife to cut into it, which was really helpful because it was really sort of like firm and hard to like cut all the way through and just get like a bite out of. But then spoons, like dessert spoons. This was really a dessert that required forks, but it was so busy at the restaurant and our waiter was off somewhere and I didn't want to bug her. And so I was like, it's fine, I can make this work. And so I'm like cutting off a piece, but I'm still like, it is quite like hard to get apart. It's just kind of like really stiff in some places. And so I get off a piece, but a piece that's still like too big to be a bite. And so I have this on my spoon and I'm like, it's fine, I'll just take like a bite of like half of it like off of my spoon. Now, see what I said before about it being really kind of stiff and like hard to fully separate the like outer shell part from itself. So I take this bite and then the other piece of it falls off my spoon and lands, like it hits my thigh and then it lands on the ground. So first of all, like it's gone. I'm no longer eating this piece of deep fried cheesecake. This was like a not insignificant portion of the dessert overall. It's gone. And it has left in its wake a splatter of the cherry raspberry sort of coolie situation that was all over this cheesecake. And some of this landed on my jeans, which not ideal, but I didn't spend, 6 months of my life knitting those jeans. Some of it landed on the sweater that I did spend 6 of my life knitting, and I was like, no, not again, not again. Like, why must disaster strike every time I wear this? So off I go to the restaurant bathroom, get some water on it. Again, it appears to have come off just fine. I'm wondering if actually the like alpaca fuzz sort of semi-mohair thing is helpful in these situations, because I think that it sort of keeps whatever I have managed to get on it this time sort of at the surface and keeps it from like penetrating into the wool, which I think maybe helps it from staining. I don't know. I just know that it has now survived 3 near-death experiences, and I mean, I'm grateful that it is so resilient. Would love for it to be less disaster prone, but here we are. Anyway, so I want to give you an update on my Peru sweater, but before we get into that, I want to tell you about our sponsor for today's video, Craftsy. Craftsy is your online resource for all things creative. They have classes in knitting and crochet, but also sewing, quilting, painting, cooking, cake decorating. Like whatever crafty thing you're looking to either take up or hone your skills in, Craftsy can help you do it. Last time I mentioned Craftsy, I was looking at the class How to Say It, Pattern Writing for Knitters by Edie Ekman. So I'm in the process of taking that class now because I'm interested in pattern design, but I think I need a structure like this to help it feel more real as a project to motivate me to start actually working up design ideas. I started watching it just still in bed one morning when Copper was demanding his morning elbow scratches. And it's given me a lot to think about in terms of how I want to write patterns, what I like, what I don't like, and how to balance that with still following the conventions that make patterns easy to follow from one to the next. So if you want to give Craftsy a try yourself, the first 1,000 of my subscribers to click the link in the video description will get a full year of premium membership to Craftsy for only $1.49. That's it for the whole year. Offers valid for new members only. Thanks so much to Craftsy for sponsoring this video. Okay, so now let's chat about my progress on my current whip, which I'm calling my Peru sweater. This is my Rivendell by Sorry Nordland. So to run the project stats real quick, this is a DK weight pattern that accommodates busts measuring from 28.75 to 61.25 inches. I'm knitting the size 3, but aiming for closer to a size 2 just with my gauge situation. The pattern costs €8.90 or about $15 Canadian, and I call this my Peru sweater because I'm knitting this out of the alpaca wool that I picked up on my recent trip to Peru, which I got from Manos de la Comunidad, which is the place where you see the alpacas and you learn all about how they make the yarn from that fiber. So just a super cool experience, and I'm really excited to finally be working up a sweater that's going to be my sort of souvenir from the trip. So this is 100% baby alpaca, and this cost me, I got 10 balls of it, $234.41 Canadian, which adding in our pattern cost puts our total project cost at about $250 Canadian. Now the pattern specifies that this is knit up at a 3.5 millimeter, but as previously discussed, sorry Nordland's gauge, many of us cannot get even close to it, so I'm knitting this up on 4 millimeter needles, and my gauge is still really small. Like I'm still having to upsize to a 3 from a 2, and honestly, if I had unlimited yarn here or the ability to easily acquire more without traveling back to Peru, that I would probably be knitting a size 4, aiming for closer to a size 2. So like, upsize my needles, still nowhere close. It's an adventure. In terms of construction, this is knit top down seamlessly in, I believe, what is called a European construction. No one has corrected me on that yet. I mentioned in the last video that I think that's what it's called. I don't feel entirely confident on this. I don't really feel entirely confident about understanding any sort of pattern structure name besides just the very simple like raglan or like bottom up seamed. Once we get into sort of nuances, I'm like, what even is a, what's the, oh, there's one that's like, starts with a C. What's it called? Not compound raglan. That's the one that's coming into my head and like blocking the other one from coming into my head. Contiguous. That's the one. I have no idea what a contiguous construction is. I've looked this up before and I don't really understand, because I think it's sort of a like, okay, but what you're describing sounds like a lot of other things. So what are the like excluding factors? Like, I feel like there's a lot of detail that goes into these things. And that's where I'm like, I think this fits the criteria of a European construction, but are there more details to that I'm not aware of that excludes this? I don't know. What is today? So I have been knitting this for 23 days since cast on. Let me put this on and show you where we're at. Oh, the other problem with this sweater, not really a problem, is the neck hole is quite tight. When I did my folded over neckband, I definitely could have done that more loosely. Also, quick tip for you if this is not something that you do while I'm trying this on. So I usually do not actually have my knitting on a cord long enough that I can try it on without moving it over to try it on tubing. I recently got a longer cord. So this is my longer cord and I'm testing out how it feels to knit on one that's long enough that I can try it on without taking it off, which mixed feelings about. I do prefer my stitches to be close together, not have to scoot things as far. But I also like not having to move things to try it on tubing. So we're testing this, we'll see how it goes. But because of that, to try it on, I have stuck some of the light bulb stitch markers just through the holes for like the key on the interchangeable needles, just to act as sort of a stitch stopper for when I try this on, so nothing slides off the end of the needles. It's just a very easy way to do it. Wow, those bangs though. Okay, so I don't really need to stand up to show you this one because like, that's it. That's all there is. It doesn't really go further than you can see. So this is pretty perfect for giving you a status update. Maybe if I like sit on my legs, will that boost me just enough to like get the V-neck? So yeah, this is where my Peru sweater currently is, which on the one hand is like, wow, like it's really coming together. Like the V-neck is done. That was a really exciting milestone for me to hit. Very happy about it. On the other hand, I'm like, it's been almost a month. Where's the rest of it? Like, not that I would normally have a sweater done in a month. Like when I finished my Serendipity sweater, and I was talking about how like compulsively I felt like I was working on that, how much the color work was motivating to me. That one I finished under a month, and that was like, oh my God, I never finish a sweater that fast. So not that I would expect it to be done by now. I just would expect to have more of it by now. Like maybe some sleeves or maybe more body, but here we are. And I mean, as it turns out, seed stitch, time consuming, which checks out because functionally, like it knits up row by row the same way that a 1x1 rib does. And that's not most people's favorite thing to do because in part, it's kind of tedious. So this, I mean, yeah, lives up to exactly what you would imagine. There is a lot of seed stitch involved. The whole back is just plain seed stitch. And yeah, it's going at the pace that would go, and not like in a way where I'm not enjoying working on it. I don't find myself like avoiding working on this. I'm knitting, well, I was gonna say exactly as much as I would like to be knitting. That's not true. I just feel like with like things are just making me like busy, and so I haven't been doing quite as much knitting as I often do. So not like because I don't want to be knitting this, just because of other obligations. So it's not at all deterring me. It's just like, wow, yeah, if I'd been knitting something different, I feel like we'd be further along by now. Now, I mentioned in my last update about this project, I was asking about the gauge situation, and I was like, okay, I have stuck with 4mm needles because I was feeling like, despite the fact that I still wasn't anywhere close to a gauge, I was like, based on what this fabric looks like, I don't think that I could size up enough to meet her gauge, like increasing my needle size to meet it, without this fabric looking weirdly open. And like, is there something inherently different to like a loose knitter meeting this gauge on 3.5mm needles versus if I upsize my needles enough to meet the gauge Like, does my fabric just look more open than theirs, or are they just like okay with a really open looking fabric? And I had a couple people give me an answer that I think makes perfect sense. I think this is probably exactly what it is, which is that when you're knitting more tightly, you are pulling your strand of yarn a little bit more tighter, and in doing that, you're sort of like thinning it out, right? Like if you look at this, if you look at the thickness of that strand and then you put tension on it, see how it gets sort of thinner? And so the theory is that tighter knitters are essentially knitting with a thinner strand of yarn because it's being pulled into that thinner shape as you go, which can result in a fabric that looks a little bit more open because your yarn just doesn't have the bounce that it would have if it wasn't being pulled so tight. So I think that's probably what's going on, and I think why I have such a hard time meeting the gauge of pattern designers who knit more loosely, because it's like my yarn just isn't behaving the same as yours because we hold it with different amounts of tension. So most likely in these cases, like if I wanted to actually be knitting at Sari's gauge, I think like if she's using a DK, I would probably need to use a worsted in order to achieve the same look, is my guess. So in my last update, I was basically at the point where I had finished the trapezoid shape that you start with for the back of the sweater, and I had started picking up to do one of the front sides, but I already knew at that point that I had made a mistake and was gonna have to rip it back. So I had just gotten a few rows in, and so since then, as you can see, I obviously have made some more progress on the front of this. So I ripped back that portion and started with one of the front sides. I honestly can't remember at this point which one it is. So to start the fronts, that meant that it was time to start delving into the cable charts for this pattern. And I was really pleasantly surprised that I feel like this pattern looks like it's pretty like complex. Like I kind of thought this might be a chart that I really had to pay a lot of really close attention to and that it would be kind of hard to execute. And the reality was that it was actually a lot simpler than I thought that it was once I got past the first row, which this is sort of a pet peeve of mine with cable patterns. And like I'm sure that there must be a reason for this, because I think this has been the case in like every cabled thing that I've ever done, or parts of it have been knit flat, which is that the pattern always has you start the chart section from the wrong side of the fabric, which I just hate. Like, why can't I just start it on a right side row? And like, again, there probably actually is a reason, but I'm just always like, why can't I start this on a right side row? Because in this very first row, like it's always hardest to follow a chart when you're first establishing things, right? When you have no existing knitting below it to follow, to like read what's going on, to use things as sort of landmarks, like, oh yeah, like this is the column where I'm just going straight up in knits or whatever. Like you have nothing to go off of. So that first row is always the hardest. You always have to pay the closest attention. And when you're doing it on the wrong side, you have to do all that attention paying and also be converting the chart to be backward. Like anything that the chart says is a purl is actually a knit and vice versa. This is why every time I'm like starting to follow a chart like this, I'm always like, oh my God, this is terrible. Because you're just like having to do so many different things at once. And so I often end up making mistakes the first time that I try to do it. So anytime I'm like at the point where, okay, we're about to start a cable chart section, I always feel like, okay, I need to do this at a time where I really have like full attention and maximum brain power, because otherwise I just find it really frustrating. So like, there's probably a reason it is this way. I just am always like, no, why? Why? So this was no exception, but things that I do to make it easier to deal with charts, like usual, I'm using a little mini version of the chart that I'm holding like this, so I'm not just fully giving away a paid pattern, but I print out a little version and then I laminate it with packing tape so that it withstands being tossed around in my project bag all the time, and then I use a little binder clip on the side to help me keep track of which row I'm on, and I just move it up along the edge as I go. And I just find that this makes it, like I have followed some patterns by doing this with like an app in my phone, but I find it very clunky to always have to have my phone open to that, and often when I'm knitting, I'm trying to get myself to not be paying attention to my phone, and if my phone's right there, I'm more likely to use it, and then, I end up, somehow I'm on Instagram. How'd that happen? And then my pattern's not there because it's on Instagram, and so I just find it much easier to have a dedicated object that is just being the chart and not being anything else that can just float around, sit beside me while I'm working on it. And I also don't have to worry about, is my phone battery drained from having this open for hours looking at this chart, you know? So I just find that having this just makes things a little bit easier. But I did find that this pattern, while I definitely had to pay close attention to the chart for the first little bit while it was sort of getting established, did find it not too bad to get it into my head fairly quickly after that. Not in a way where it's memorized, like I don't have in my head like, this many knits and then this many purls and this many knits and this many purls and this is when you cross or things like that. Like I don't have the pattern of the whole row memorized, but what I do have memorized is like relative to what I'm looking at in the rows below me. What do I have to do on this row relative to that at what row counts? So it got much easier to work on, and kind of to the point where I'm really only using this chart to track what row I'm on so that I know like when am I doing increases, when am I doing cable twists and things like that, but less so just like what is the pattern going on in each row, even though it's not the same row to row. Like this isn't one where it's just whatever you did here last row, you do here again. It does change every other row, but like it's just two things, and it's been simple enough for me to keep straight in my head what I do relative to what based on what I'm looking at, if that makes sense. So it has gotten to the point where I definitely wouldn't call this a mindless knit, but it's definitely closer to that than it was in the earlier stages of doing the cabling, because at first it was sort of like anything I have on right now, I'm only gonna process maybe like 25 to 30% of what's going on. And now I'm at the point where like, I'm still not gonna put on a show that requires like full 100% like heavy brain power attention, but I can put on a show that only requires like 75% of me. Now, one thing that a few people had mentioned in comments about this, and I've really been getting the impression that some of you feel like you're watching a train wreck happening in slow motion on this one. And I mean, I could be wrong. This could be naive. Maybe the naivety is part of the train wreck. This would make sense. But I feel like it's gonna be fine. I do. Part of that is that I was seeing a lot of concern about like, I wouldn't knit that kind of detailed cable pattern in alpaca because the stitch definition, like you're not gonna see it. And I'm just like, I see it. Like I see it very clearly, and I'm wondering if I suspect there probably is a really broad range in alpaca fibers. Like some are probably a lot fuzzier than others. Like actually speaking of my cursed no frills cardigan, the mohair in that one is actually mostly baby alpaca on a silk core. So I think that there are varieties of alpaca that are super duper fuzzy and would be more akin to knitting this like with a mohair and would hide a lot of the stitch definition. This is not one of those, and I think that that's maybe just like having the ball of yarn with me already and like looking at that. I wasn't concerned about the stitch definition in a way that somebody else might be if they weren't familiar with the exact yarn that I'm knitting this out of and having this to go off of. Like if I were just thinking about the baby alpaca in my no frills cardigan and applying that to this, like yeah, it makes sense to have concerns, but I think that in the context of this project with this yarn, I think that's safely not a problem. And I can say safely also because this part has actually already been blocked, which we'll get into in more detail in a minute, but like it's not gonna change dramatically in blocking because it's been blocked. Now, one thing that I wondered after I finished the first side, kind of come forward so I can show you this. Oh, it wraps around like all the way to the back. But so see this part here. I kind of look at that now and I'm like, was there supposed to be another cable twist like here? But I looked at the pattern, I looked at it again, I looked at it again, and I'm like, if I was supposed to do a cable twist somewhere in here, it's very unclear. Because so when you're first starting the front, it's sort of doing a thing where like, it's referencing the chart, but it's like, knit this row, knit that row again, knit rows 1 and 2, knit rows 1 and 2 X many more times. So you're just repeating these same rows several times, which don't have a cable cross in them. So the first time that it clearly to me indicates we're now working the chart from this row normally all the way up to this one, which does make you hit a cable row, there's like already kind of like an inch where there's no cable where it seems like maybe there should have been. So I don't know if maybe I was kind of supposed to magically know like, okay, well the cable twist happens on row X, so once you get to row X of your front, regardless of which row of the chart it's telling you to reference, you should be twisting. Like that feels like a leap that a pattern should not expect me to make. But looking at this, I'm like, I don't understand why there's not a cable twist here. So that just seems weird to me. I didn't like go back and test this, so I don't know if maybe there's some reason why you couldn't have done one more twist up there, why it wouldn't like fit in. So I'm not saying that you should do that if you do this pattern. But if you are adventurous and you're knitting this pattern, I would be curious to know if it works out if you do throw in a cable twist on the row number that corresponds to the row in the chart that has the cable twist in it, despite the fact that according to the pattern, you're still following like row 2 or something. I'd be curious to know if that works and for some reason the pattern just doesn't have you do that, or if I somehow misunderstood this, even though I've tried to figure out so many times if there's a way that I would have misunderstood this, or if there's just a reason why it just doesn't work. I'm very curious. Please report back. I also found when I was starting the second side after doing the first side, there is kind of a funny like mental flip that has to happen because the chart for one side is the same as the chart for the other side, except that it's mirrored. So you're doing things in like the backwards order, except like because you're knitting flat, you knit it in both ways on both of them, but it's different in terms of like what's knit and what's purled. So I just found it like it took me a few rows to not have to like think too hard about what was happening in each row and be able to just be like, okay, this is the new status quo. I understand from last time how to read what to do next based on what I'm already seeing in the stitches below. Good to go. Like it became second nature very quickly, but there was a brief sort of like a switching cost of like, oh God, why is it all wrong? Why is it the same but different? Also, on the topic of, is this just a train wreck happening in slow motion? I do think I'd mentioned in my last video that I think that the seed stitch is helping to mitigate some of the things that people tend to have problems with alpaca, which is the fact that it tends to stretch out a lot under its own weight over time. I have had some people corroborating that theory, saying like, yeah, that should help with a lot of that. I also had someone suggest the idea that adding like faux seams afterward down the sides of the body on this one, because I guess with alpaca, it can tend to sag there, like at the sides of the body the most, which makes a lot of sense to me. Like adding a seam there would add some structural integrity, and that's one where I think I'm gonna see how I feel about it when I'm done and what it sort of seems to be trying to do like as I wear it. Am I worried about that? And like, will I be thrilled if I decide I need to add a seam on a seamless sweater? I, the person who hates seaming garments. Like, no, that won't be my favorite part of the process. But it would actually be, I think, fairly simple to do it on this one, because this pattern actually has, I learned when I joined in the round, sort of a faux seam that it has you doing anyway, where you can see that one twisted stitch running down the center with purls on either side. So I think that would act as a really helpful guide when I'm doing seaming, to know that I'm like following the right column up all the way. So that would make it a little bit easier. I would love to not have to do that, but in the event that I am starting to see issues with draping and stretch in this, I do think that's a good option to like have in my back pocket. And again, because of all the alpaca concerns, I was like, okay, I think that I'm gonna have to do some mid-project blocking during this to make sure that I understand how much growth is gonna come from blocking. And again, with alpaca, a lot of the growth that people talk about is not necessarily actually from blocking so much as it's from wearing it and the way that it will just kind of sag under gravity over time, and without the elasticity of wool to like snap back, it can just kind of tend to get longer and longer and longer. So again, I think this is going to be mitigated in some part by the seed stitch, but it's still definitely something that's not going to be a non-factor probably. But I wanted to know, okay, that's a factor that we're just gonna kind of have to wait and see to a degree, but a factor that I can account for right now is blocking, to know, is it going to gain much length from that? So basically I knit up the two front sides and got to the point where you join them and join everything in the round of the underarm, and that's when I stopped and blocked it. So before this had any neck ribbing on it, I blocked it. So this is it post blocking. So far we don't have any wild amounts of growth going on. It was pretty standard blocking effects to me, but again, it has not yet had to contend with like the gravity of the situation, if you will. So once I got it off the blocking mats, the next thing that I did was I picked up around the neck, because I really wanted to add this in so that I would understand how this is going to sit, because the neckline really changes a lot of things. And also, of course, when you don't have a neckband on, a neck always feels a lot more open than it's actually going to be. And particularly because I was seeing a lot of concern about like, you're knitting this out of alpaca, it's a deep V-neck, like it might end up being like really, really giant, be careful. And I think because my row gauge is shorter than Sari's by a pretty significant amount, like this V-neck does not look nearly as dramatic as it does in the pattern, which I'm resisting the urge to try to block it to match, because so the actual neckline part that I picked up and knit, it has not been blocked, right? The rest has been blocked, but the neckband hasn't. I'm resisting the urge to try to block that deeper, because I've been told so many times that it's very likely that it's going to sag. So I'm just kind of trusting that gravity is going to give it more of the big dramatic V that is shown in the pattern, because that's what I would ultimately like it to be. But I'm resisting the urge to try to force the issue in fear of forcing it and then it still sags and then it gets like out of control. But I also think that there's probably a limit on how much it can do that, just because this is already bound off with an Italian sewn bind off. So it does have a limited amount of stretch. It's not like it can just stretch endlessly, but it can stretch a decent amount. So we're talking ourselves out of like yanking it down on the blocking mats for now, and we're gonna apply patience and see what happens. There is also another variation in the pattern where instead of the ribbed neckband, it's an I-cord, which would leave the neck even more open. But I don't know, it's funny, when I look at people's project photos, it looks like a lot of people have opted for the I-cord instead of the ribbing, which is just so funny to me because the effect of that ribbed neckband is so much of what I love about this. Like, if I look at the pattern photos with that, I'm like, this is a beautiful pattern, I love it, I must knit it. And the photos without it, with the I-cord instead, I'm like, not for me. Like, it's just, it makes it such a different piece, and that may be for the better if you look at this and it's not your style. Like, maybe the version with the I-cord totally is your style. It's very polarizing to me. I'm like, love this one, that one's not for me. So there was never a doubt in my mind which version of the neckband I was going to do. So I'm very happy with how this looks, minus, again, that I would like it to be a little bit more dramatic like it is in the photos, but patience. And I really love the tidy line down the center of the V. Like, doesn't it look so good? It looks so good. It feels like something where it's like, how did I knit that? And especially because when it's on your needles, when you're working this part of the round, it's kind of forced into just like a circular shape on your needles, right? You can't really see the pointiness of the V-neck when you're knitting it. So it wasn't until I'd like finished the sewn bind off and had it fully off the needles that I was like, oh my God, it's a V-neck. Look at it. Look how like precise and geometric it is. It's very satisfying to me in this way where it feels like something that shouldn't be possible to make using this technique, because it doesn't look like that's what you're making the whole time you're making it, and then it just magically is. I was just very pleased with it. Oh, another thing to note on this neckband, again, I think because my row gauge is just different than Sari's, I actually ended up knitting an extra row of the ribbing than is written in the pattern, because I did the recommended number of rows, and I was looking at mine, and I was looking at the pattern photos, and I was like, I feel like her neckband looks chunkier than mine. Like, it's more dramatic. And I really love that drama. And I was like, I don't want to take any chances about wishing that this ribbing was deeper. So I decided to do one extra row just to beef it up a little bit more. And I feel like now it matches the pattern photos a lot better than it did before. So after I finished the neckband, I went back to working on the body. So I'm now just working on that in the round. And my current plan is that I'm going to continue that until I reach the base of this V motif, because I mean, despite the fact that like, obviously it's already met up here and the cables are almost met up, it does still take many more rows for like the outermost stripes of the V to connect. So I think right now I'm like a quarter of the way through the chart. That is the difference from like the bottom of the V to where the V motif ends. So I've done about a quarter of that. So I have quite a few more rows to go before I'm done that segment of things. And then once I reach that point, I'm gonna switch to doing sleeves, because we are managing our yarn quantities a little. I think there's probably not enough to do this as a full length, but that's fine, because I think it's going to be super cute cropped, and it's just important to me that the V motif gets finished and the sleeves get finished, and then like whatever extra length there is or is not after that, I do not care. Like, if I'm starting ribbing basically as soon as that V finishes at the front, that's totally fine. As long as the motif looks complete, I am happy with whatever length it ends up being. And now that I'm back to working on the body in the round, the pace of this project feels like it's changed a lot. It's been sort of jumping all over the map, because at first I was working just on that trapezoid for the back, which is all in seed stitch, but that's one where you're like starting at the top of the neck and then you're increasing out along the edges as you go to get wider, right? So it starts out where like your rows are really short and then they slowly get longer and longer as you go. And then you're working on the fronts, which are also getting longer as you go. Like, they're increasing out to shape the V-neck, but they're like quite small. So you're going back and forth a lot and you're working a charted portion for a huge percentage of it. So to now be working on rounds that are like the full body, where this chart pattern is only a small part just at the front and a part that's getting ever smaller in each round, so most of it's just seed stitch, we're now at a point where like most of it's pretty mindless. Like, I still have to be paying attention a little bit to the seed stitch to just make sure that I haven't like gotten off by a stitch and now I'm just like knitting knits and purling purls, right? I have to make sure it's still offset properly, but it's much less demanding than when you have to be paying attention to a chart for like almost your entire row. And so it's slowed down the pace of things in a way where it's a little bit more leisurely to work on now. And it's like, okay, I did the chart, now I can just like chill and do my seed stitch for like a million stitches around this whole round, which at this point feels like a nice break. I do think that it will start to feel more monotonous and I will miss the more active parts, but that's just when I'll be excited to switch to sleeves, where I get to follow a lot more charted stuff a lot more frequently again. So we'll kind of be bouncing back and forth in terms of the pacing on this one. So yeah, we're finishing the V and then doing sleeves, because I do not want short sleeves. I want the sleeves that I want. The body will compromise as much or as little as it needs to. So in terms of quantities, I've currently used up 3 whole balls of my 10. And I'm currently working out of my 4th ball, which has not been used a ton. It's just been used to do the neckband and like maybe this much of my body under the arm joint from there. So based on our yarn quantities, we're pretty exactly a third of the way through our yarn quantity. Is this a third of a sweater? TBD. It's funny because in terms of yarn, I feel like this project is going really quickly, right? And in terms of time, I feel like it's dragging, right? Like if this is a third of the sweater, like, okay, I've spent almost a month on this already. It's gonna take me 2 more months to finish it. So it'll be interesting to see how the pace of this goes, especially how the sleeves affect that, because like I said, there's more like active cable charting kind of work on those. And it is small circumference, which I just tend to not love as much to do, but maybe it'll be a nice break from the really large stitch count of the body in the seed stitch. I don't know. It remains to be seen, much like it remains to be seen whether this is indeed a train wreck happening in slow motion, as so many seem to think that it is with the Alpaca stretch of it all. So stay tuned to find out whether it is. Okay, so now let's get into some acquisition / future plans chat. And I mean, not really acquisitions, because the update here is that there still are none, but related to my yarn buying ban. And I just want to chat about that, check in on it. So when I was doing my yarn and knitting tools, notions, stash, etc., organizing videos, I decided that I wanted to start a yarn buying ban. I prefer to buy yarn kind of for my next project as I know what I want to do, instead of having like a backlog that I'm working my way through. But I'd sort of ended up with a few project quantities lined up a little bit faster than I could knit through them. And I was feeling like I would like to get things back to the point where I don't feel like my next project is prescribed for me already. I prefer to have the freedom to change my mind while I'm working on my current project about what I feel like I want to knit next. So I've been doing a good job about that. I've not been buying any more yarn. And just to recap, the terms of this yarn buying ban are that I cannot buy new yarn this year, by which I decided the end is actually Boxing Day, because I'm not gonna not buy it 4 days sooner when it's half off just for the sake of hitting 2026. Or I've actually started using my last project quantity of yarn. And the one exception that I put into place for myself is like, if you end up at a yarn festival, you can buy something. Like, let's be reasonable, let's remember the spirit of this, and we're trying not to accumulate a big stash that we have to work our way through several projects, but like you can get something, just like be reasonable. So since I have been doing a good job of sticking to this, I now just have one project quantity left after my Peru sweater, and that is my Wensley worsted from La Bien Aimée in the colorway Coquelicot, which is the most recent one that I bought, knowing I kind of have more yarn than I would like to have right now. But look at the color of it. I'm obsessed with it, and they were having a 30% off sale, which is a lot on expensive yarn. So this is the one that's queued up for my next project, and I've been sort of using this because I love it so much, because I find this color so glorious. I've sort of been using this as my deterrent, like when I see something that is tempting to me in the yarn world, before I even let myself look too closely, I'm like, but think about your Wensley worsted in the colorway Coquelicot. Think about how beautiful that book club cardigan is that you've been planning to knit with it. Think about how much more beautiful it would be in this color. So I've really been leaning on this to distract myself from the prospect of buying other yarn, because just, it's perfect. It's the most beautiful, bright, saturated reddish orange, and I'm so excited to work with it. I think next, though, like the book club cardigan that I want to make with it is also very detailed, cabley, etc. By the time I'm finished this project, my Peru sweater, which is proving to be time consuming, it seems possible that I might want to start a different kind of project, but I don't want to not use this for what I want to use it for. You know, I don't want to use it for like a non-textured thing just to have a change of pace. So I might sort of be backed into a bit of a corner here. I had mentioned thinking about knitting a hat in recent videos. We'll circle back to that in a minute, and that might be a good sort of palette cleanser in between. So in order to not break my yarn buying ban, what might need to happen here is that I might, once I finish my Peru sweater, swatch for this project, get started on it, like get it set up to the point where it's sort of past all the hard setup parts and easy to just sort of pick up and continue from there. And at that point, I will have met the criteria, so a little bit of a technicality, but I will have met the criteria of tapping into my last project quantity of yarn, thereby unlocking my ability to buy more yarn. And I think that making sure that I kind of do that initial setup stages of the project, like the parts where, I don't know about you, but I often find when I'm starting a new project, I need like, I always think it's half an hour. It usually ends up being closer to an hour of like, nobody bug me, nothing's on TV that I'm really paying any attention to. I just need to like lock in on this and understand what I need to do to get this going and get set up and kind of get myself oriented to the pattern. And that is a lot of the initial hurdle in starting a new project. So I think that if I can do my swatching and get that done, I feel like that really is a significant, like, I have started that project. And as much as I'm not usually someone to be having multiple projects on the go, I think because of the back-to-back cable situation, I would be comfortable using that as my, like, okay, that's gotten to a significant enough part that I feel comfortable pressing pause on this, starting something that's a bit of a more mindless palette cleanser, and then circling back to this project with a bit more of a clean slate if I feel like that's what I need at that point, just after an already complex project. And truthfully, like, I'm so excited for this book club cardigan, but I'm also kind of intimidated by it. I don't know. I think that it looks like a complicated pattern. And again, I don't think that it's actually going to be like hard to follow once I get it going. I think just what I was talking about, especially when it's like you start it on the wrong side and you have to establish the pattern, converting everything. And because I think it is it seamed? At least it's knit flat because it's a cardigan and there's like shoulders. I don't know. I just feel like it's going to be just a little bit of an ambitious project that I'm sort of like, okay, it's all this complicated cables and I don't even get to like relax into knitting it in the round eventually at some point. So equal parts excited and a little bit scared of that future plan. So I had also, to circle back now to the hat, in a couple videos ago, I'd asked for a suggestion for a hat pattern that I could use to basically create a little color chart for the brim on a hat that would be reversible. So you could decide if you wanted to wear it like with the color work pattern showing that day or with just a plain hat that day. And overwhelmingly, the suggestion was the Musselburgh hat, and I expressed in my last video, I hear that sounds great, except that with my, you know, subpar spatial reasoning skills, I was just really worried about figuring out the exact correct placement for the color work element so that it would land on the brim and like facing the right side up and everything on this weird pattern that's basically an enclosed cylinder that you're like folding up into itself and then flipping things upside down. And I just did not trust my ability to like place that accurately, but I have been assured that the pattern actually contains a diagram for the brim in case you want to do color blocking or other things to help you understand where it goes and which way it faces. So I haven't actually purchased the pattern yet to confirm this for myself, but that is the rumor. That's what I'm being told. And that makes me feel much more optimistic about this potentially working. So I am thinking that that is probably the most likely route that I'm going to end up going for this theoretical hat project that is still kind of a maybe, but that the materials for which might be the thing for which I'm sort of enacting a technicality on the no buy, where I like start the book club cardigan and then pause it so that I can then buy the materials for this hat. But I think that the sort of mindless stockinette nature of all but just a very small colorwork portion on the brim would be a really perfect palette cleanser between these two very textured cabley projects. So that might be a thing. We are still tunnel vision on the Peru sweater. I'm trying not to get too far ahead of myself and get myself looking at yarn to buy because it's not the time. That said though, am I daydreaming a little bit about winter knits? Yes. Do I already have some Ravelry favorites that I'm eyeing up for a future winter knitting plans video? Yes, I do. Do they mostly have one thing in common, which might be stranded color work? Yes, because basically since, I think it was May that I knit my Serendipity sweater, previously mentioned, knit up unprecedentedly quickly for me in my knitting. I found it so addictive to work on, and I'm finding myself craving some more of that. So now I'm at a point where I'm kind of debating, do I knit something that's stranded color work that's been sitting in my favorites? Or is it finally time to kind of kick myself into trying coming up with my own first sweater design, like a colorwork design? And I feel a little bit like, I don't know, like I don't have like an idea for that yet. So like probably just knit the things in your favorites that you already like and would like to do. Knit your own thing when you have an idea for it. But this is also a thing where like knowing myself and like the way that I tend to work creatively, and this came up when I was talking about Craftsy earlier, I just tend to need more of a structured approach to creative things. Like I need to actively brainstorm to come up with ideas. Like sudden inspiration, never heard of her. Like people who just like have a spontaneous idea in the shower or like wake up in the middle of the night, This has never happened to me in my whole life. Like I think of myself as like a pretty creative person. Like most of the things that I like to do involve creating. Even my job as a graphic designer involves a lot of creativity. I love to write fiction, which involves creativity. In none of these realms do I ever just like spontaneously, without trying, like have an interesting idea. So I've sort of for some reason been operating under the premise that knitting would somehow be different. I would like have an idea of a sweater I wanted to make, and then that would be the time when I would like sit down and figure out exactly how to design it and how to maybe eventually create a pattern out of that. In retrospect, I have no idea why I thought that would happen. Like with everything, like I am a designer and not an artist because I want to work from a brief. I want to have a problem that I am now figuring out how to solve creatively. Most of the time that I have written fiction, it has been in the context of either an assignment or of National Novel Writing Month, NaNoWriMo, where it's a very specific prescribed time of year that we are writing a book now, whether you're ready or not, so you better get ready, right? So I'm very used to having circumstances that sort of prompt me to sit down and to brainstorm and to figure out what I want to create. So I'm kind of feeling like, why do you think that knitting isn't going to work the same way for you? Like, why do you not think that maybe you need to go a little bit out of your way to like impose some structure on yourself within which you will then be motivated to find creativity? Makes perfect sense to me based on literally everything else in my life. So this is why I'm starting that Craftsy class, where I'm trying to understand sort of the process and the basics of pattern design to sort of get my brain in that gear and starting to think about, if I'm going to design something, what would I like it to be? So I'm sort of in between, is my next strand of color work going to be a favorite pattern of mine, or is it going to be me trying to design something myself? And I don't have the answer to that yet. That's just sort of been a direction that my brain has been wandering, especially when I'm thinking about yarn and not buying yarn. There's a lot of like, well, what kind of yarn would I want to buy? Would it be for this pattern that I'm obsessed with and have been obsessed with for a very long time? Or is it going to be something for a pattern that doesn't exist yet, even inside your own brain, and you need to start working on creating something there? So I don't know which way it's going to go. That's just sort of what I'm oscillating between. I think I need to just start kind of, again, like I said, actively brainstorming, which might start maybe with just like actively trying to gather some inspiration, pulling together colorwork patterns that I like, and trying to identify what sort of things do I like? Do I maybe want to incorporate? What sort of things do I not like? And what sort of things am I just not seeing? What sort of inspiration can I pull in from other areas and try to apply that to the realm of colorwork knitting that I'm just not really seeing broadly available in the pattern world, and that I could maybe offer to the pattern world? Because I think that as much as I do think that there's so much room for like uniquely detailed, well-crafted basics in the knitting pattern realm, that's just not ever what I'm going to be contributing to it, because I don't, again, my spatial reasoning, I'm not under any delusion that I'm going to be like a master of construction. Like, I don't think that's ever going to be what I am like known for. Like, my thinking is like, get a construction down that works and it's versatile, and then focus on creating the like interesting colorwork designs that are really like, that's what I feel like I can offer based off of my skill set and off of my background as a graphic designer. Sort of along the lines of this sweater, which is why I was so compelled when I saw this And Other Stories sweater and really wanted to try to find it somewhere, and ultimately gave up and knit it myself, because it felt like something so different than anything I'd seen before in the knitting world. And that's what I think I would like to figure out how to bring to it, is like unexpected uses of color in colorwork knitting, and sort of making these unusual or distinct effects feel approachable and manageable, even if the end result is not familiar, that the process is, if that makes sense. All right, I think that's all that I've got for you today on the knitting front, but I do have a pretty beefy off the needles update for you today, I feel like. So let's get started first with a small business shout out. So the business I want to shout out today is one that I've actually been working with as a graphic designer for more than 10 years at this point. So that is Wooftown, which is an independent pet supply store based in Toronto. They also now have a New York location as well. I've been working with John, the owner, for 1 billion years, like since I was still in university. He's the best. I've recently been doing a lot of work for Wooftown, including the packaging for a new store brand line of treats that they just put out, which was super fun to work on. It's really fun. A lot of the work that I do ends up like staying in the digital realm, so when I get to do things that actually end up manifesting as oh no. Okay, hopefully my frame isn't too different because my phone just spontaneously died without warning. Thank you so much for the usual 10% battery warning you tend to give me. Didn't this time. Shout out. Okay, what was Wolftown? Okay, it's just really cool to me when the things that I design actually end up being like real objects out there in the world, just because so much of my work doesn't and exists as like PDFs on the internet and things like that, which I love to make. I enjoy that process so much, but there's something so different about seeing a physical thing that you've actually designed. So that's been a really fun thing that I've loved working on with Wolftown. But also just like as a person with a dog, Wolftown is the best. Like especially if you were in Canada, especially if you were in the GTA, their delivery is unmatched. They don't use like couriers or the mail service or anything like that. They have their own drivers who bring your order, and their threshold for free delivery is so low, and like it's so fast. I order things from them and they're there usually the next day, occasionally the same day, depending on what time I ordered it. Like sometimes I'm like, literally, how did you even have time to get this here? Like what what's happening? So I highly recommend them. They carry a lot of really good, really high quality stuff. Again, like I said, they're a small independent business, which I love. And they also like, this is not like affiliate or sponsored or anything like that, but they do have just the usual like refer a friend thing. So if you haven't ordered from Wolftown before, if you want to give it a try, you can use my link down in the description. It gets you $20 off an order of $39 or more. So like half off potentially your order. So if you're in Canada, I highly recommend taking advantage of that. If you're in the States, I don't think my like referral thingy works for a discount, but the American version of their site, you can absolutely order things online from there too. And I just think it's really nice to be able to support a small independent business made by really cool people for things that are like basics of life that like you needed to get for your dog anyway. And it just feels nicer to be able to get it from there than a big box store, while being equally as convenient, if not more so, because of the delivery. Now let's do a reading update. So, as mentioned in my last video, it was recently my birthday, and at my dinner with Jan yesterday, she gave me a birthday present, which included this book, which has been on my like to acquire list vaguely for years. I think this is published in 2021 because of the cover. Look at it. It's so beautiful. It's a YA novel. The premise, all that I know about it is that basically her boyfriend Sam has died recently, and suddenly she starts like hearing from him, like his number is contacting her, which doesn't make sense because he's dead. But look at the cover. It's so beautiful. And what's so funny is that I never talked to Jan about this, but so Jan is also a graphic designer. We met at design school, and Jan recently texted me being like, have you read this book? Look at how beautiful the cover is. I had to buy it for myself. I'm gonna read it. Look how pretty it is. Tell me if you read it. And I was like, no, I haven't, but I have had it on my list for a really long time because it is so beautiful. You know me so well. And actually, let me show you. The cover gets so much better because there's a clear thing going on. Get it? Because like Sam's not really there because he's dead, which is dark, but such a good design. I love it so much. And surprise for me, Jan bought it for me also for my birthday. So I'm really excited to read it also because Jan mentioned she's still like in the middle of it. So I'm thinking I'll try to read it soon, and that way we can sort of talk about it as we're reading it together, which is not a thing that I usually really have occasion to do with someone. So that'll be really cool. And yeah, I have been trying to, every once in a while, I kind of try to read books that are outside of my sort of reading comfort zone, because sometimes that's how you find the books that you love the most, right? Like sometimes there are real like outliers, or something really like broadens your horizon in a way that you really love. Like sometimes books surprise you. Sometimes you love something about a book that just would never happen within the genre you normally read. Or I just, so many books that I love are not the books that I turn to as my comfort reads, but it's hard to find those books without reading a lot of books that you feel like about. And I feel like recently I've just been getting a lot of those books of like, I think it's a good book, I am struggling to connect with it, I'm struggling to feel invested, I'm reading it slowly, like it's just not giving me the feeling that I'm looking for when I'm reading a book. And I've just had like a few of those lately, and I feel like I really need something that I can just get through a little bit more quickly and cleanse the palate a little. And I'm hoping that this, as a YA story, especially as one that I can read alongside my friend, I'm hoping that this can be one of those. Also, this particular edition, like no expenses spared. There's like painted edges, there's even color like on the inside, like every single page has pink ink on it in addition to black, which is an extra cost every time you add an extra color on the inside of a book. So I just like, it's so beautiful. I mean, to be fair, it was a $40 Canadian book, so I guess that tracks. But it's It's so pretty. I'm really excited to dig into it. Other off the needles category today. I feel like we maybe at this point need to officially add like a TV category to this because it's come up quite a lot recently. And this week's I'm not proud of. I have been extorted and it has worked. So basically, if you've been watching my videos for a while, particularly the off the needles segments, you will know that I'm an avid viewer of The Bachelor. If you also follow The Bachelor, you will know that they've made an incredibly controversial choice for their next Bachelorette. They have cast Taylor Frankie Paul of Secret Lives of Mormon Wives / TikTok soft swinging scandal fame. And, you know, I think that their ratings have been falling for a really long time. And I think that this is a Hail Mary. I think that they are absolutely going to get more viewers than usual for this season. And what happens after that is TBD. I see a lot of people acknowledging like, okay, this is a controversial choice because this girl has like an interesting record. Don't know how ethical of a choice it is to cast her as a lead, but it's gonna work. It's gonna bring all this new life to the franchise, all this new interest. It's gonna reinvigorate the series. And I'm just not that confident because it's a wild choice. Like, if you know nothing about her, I also really knew nothing about her. She has like an arrest on record for domestic violence. That doesn't seem like a great candidate for a lead for this show. Anyway, so that's why it's sort of a wild pick. She's also just known for being like extremely candid, extremely kind of like openly messy, right? So interesting choice for a franchise that tends to be a lot more buttoned up than that. But this is where I'm like, will it absolutely boost ratings for this season? Yes, 100%. I think it's a Hail Mary. I think in terms of ratings for this season, I think it's going to work. I don't know where it leaves you after that, though. So, like, to me, I don't think this is necessarily saving the series. Maybe it will. But I think it also might just be more of a, like, I'd rather burn out than fade away kind of decision. Like, I think this just might be them going out with a bang. Because I don't know where you go after this. Because who is going to be on her season as contestants when anyone who she actually ends up with is like inherently going to now be on a reality show that is very Real Housewives-esque, like that is following your family life. You are immediately springboarded into the influencer full swing. And for a franchise that has so long been so fixated on like, you have to be here for the right reasons, and like it has to be unspoken, any like influencing benefits you might get after that, this is like a complete upheaval because no one but people who would like to be influencers could ever be with her. Like, your life is inherently in the spotlight if you end up with her. So I see how this season is going to be a really big deal. I'm not sure where you go after that. Like, is it forevermore just like, this influencer needs like an Instagram husband? Will it be you? You know, like, I don't, not even that, because like, that is kind of already what it is, because by the time someone is cast as the Bachelorette, they already have some fame from being on The Bachelor. Their future partner is probably going to be an Instagram husband. But like, you're basically auditioning to be on a reality show by being on this reality show. Like, you're auditioning to then be on Secret Lives of Mormon Wives. Like, who do you cast next? Like, is it someone as high profile, as controversial? Is it someone less so and now it's like a big letdown? Like, I don't really know what the moves are from there. And truthfully, I don't really think that they do either. So it's going to be very interesting to see what happens with this season. But I'm not convinced that this is what's going to save it. I feel like I'm seeing that as kind of a popular response. I disagree. I think most likely we're going out with a bang. I honestly think it might accelerate the death of the show that's been like slowly dying for a long time in a world of like Love is Blind and Love Island and all these things that are becoming like ever more popular. I think it's been fizzling, and I think that instead of quietly fizzling for several more years until it just finally, the last little bit of light is out, I think it's just gonna like explode and then be done. So I could be wrong. I'm interested to see what happens there, but unknown. Also, I'm not watching The Golden Bachelor this season, which is the first time I have not watched a season of anything Bachelor related. in like well over a decade. So I love my Bachelor podcasts. I listen to many of them. So I will still be listening to those. I'm testing out my first season of just listening and not watching, as I think all of them have mentioned that they know they have listeners who do that. So we're testing that out. I don't know. I feel like the first Golden season was really wholesome and really heartwarming. And then I feel like, I don't know, with Jones, I just started to get bored. Like after all the sort of like characters go home in like the first half of the season, once it gets serious, I feel like we just don't get to see, like people are just looking for different things at different stages of life, and we don't really get to see the same like chemistry. Like I don't really feel like I'm watching people fall in love the same way you do on a good season of the regular show. It just feels more like, yeah, we could be buddies for the next decade or so. Great, you seem nice. Like once all the really interesting people, sort of characters who weren't real contenders, were gone, I was just sort of like, okay. So I was already feeling like not super enthused about it. Then come to find out that a season of Golden seems to be replacing a season of the flagship show every year. Like we either get Bachelor or Bachelorette of each, rather than like we used to get Bachelor and Bachelorette in the same year. And now the guy they cast for this season is just like he's the Golden Bachelor, and he went on a podcast and said that he prefers to date women ages 45 to 60 on a show where the age bracket's supposed to start at 60. And I've heard from all my podcasts that the first episode is like basically a giant apology tour for that. And like, you can be sorry you said it, but like, you're not really going to convince me that you don't really feel that way. Like, I don't know. Maybe you'll pick someone. Maybe they'll be like, wow, I'm so surprised. I didn't realize that I could love someone who's 72 as much as someone who's 52. But wow, I've learned. But like, have you? And in the week of not having that to watch, I mean, I do have it to watch. I'm just choosing not to. But this is where I feel like I've been extorted. I am now watching The Secret Lives of Mormon Wives because I feel like I need the history on this Bachelorette that they've chosen, which I hate so much that I'm doing that, because I know that that's exactly what they wanted. They were like, we will cast this new Bachelorette. It'll be great because it'll get us a new audience for Secret Lives of Mormon Wives. And it's going to reinvigorate the Bachelorette by casting this really big high-profile name from this show. They knew exactly what they were doing and it worked. And I hate when I can see a corporation have like a very calculated strategy and then I fall for it anyway. I hate it. But here we are, because I feel like now I need to know. Also, can we just say, like, I thought from last season of The Bachelor, Grant season, I thought the most compelling candidate of that to be Bachelorette, because that's normally where Bachelorettes come from, would be Latia. But I thought, you know, it might be a struggle that she is Mormon, talked about that being quite important to her. And so like, if her whole cast is going to be Mormon, that really kind of like starts to pigeonhole the franchise in terms of casting the next Bachelor out of that crop. And like, is that how the show just immediately becomes like an all Mormon show forevermore, in the same way that it kind of became an evangelical Christian show for a really long time? And so it's just, I kind of figured Latia was off the table for that reason. And now they cast Taylor Frankie Paul. I'm like, well, apparently that wasn't disqualifying. Why couldn't we just have Latia? Mind you, I think there are other reasons why they didn't want to cast Latia. Anyway, these are my thoughts on reality TV at the moment. What else? I wanted to also mention, I have been doing a lot of scrapbooking lately. This is the thing that I've been doing sort of in spurts ever since I started knitting. I used to do it a lot more consistently, but since starting knitting, a lot of my hobbies I found harder to do on a consistent basis. I think there's like a struggle where knitting is a thing that doesn't really require a lot of me, and so I'm kind of always feeling up to knitting, whereas a lot of my other hobbies are just a little bit more mentally demanding, scrapbook being like just a little bit more so, and then things like fiction writing being way more so. And so I've really been struggling to figure out how to like balance these things since I started knitting, because it's like I could always knit, and so I often just end up always knitting. But so I've recently been doing a lot more scrapbooking. I find it really fun to do scrapbooking. It's a thing that I enjoy. I love collecting little paper paraphernalia from things and hoarding them in a little box until I lay them out nicely into spreads. And for me, it's just a nice, like, as a graphic designer, I love playing around with layout and color and shape and things like that. And this is just kind of an application of that thing I love to do, but that doesn't feel like work to me because it's very different from what I spend all my work hours doing. So it's like a way to do that is unburdened from the work life of it all that happens when you make a career out of something that you enjoy doing, but now you have to do it like more hours in a week than you would ever want to. So that's all that I have for you today. What do I want to ask you today? Do you think you're watching a train wreck in slow motion? No, you know what? No, I don't want to ask that. I feel like I know the answer from a lot of people, and I'm forging ahead, and I would love to know, how does creativity work for you? Are you like a flashes of inspiration person, or are you like an active brainstorm person? And if you're the latter, what are your sort of favorite ways to go about that? Maybe let's see if you have any ideas that you can share with me to kind of help get me past this mental hurdle of starting to think about designing a colorwork sweater for myself, because I so want to do it. I just feel a little bit like I'm scared to approach the starting line. So what works for you, especially if you have experience in this realm in particular, but even if not, in any other sort of creative pursuits, what helps you kind of get those creative gears turning? I would love to know. And if you'd like to be here next time, I hope you'll consider subscribing if you haven't already. But if you already have, you're my favorite. And I'll see you next time. Bye.